Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our My Life in Him devotional discussion for the week of August the 30th through September 3rd. I'm Steve Lusk with the Red Bank Church of Christ in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and joining me today is Blake Hayes, our youth minister. Tommy Stone, our preaching minister, who is usually with us, is actually helping a brother with a flat tire right now. So he's out of pocket, but we hope and pray they get that fixed and everything gets back on the road. Our theme this week is dealing with anxiety, and we are 2/3 of the way through this year already. This is the 35th week of our study. We're recording this on Wednesday, September 1st, and this year has just flown by in so many ways. And of course, it reminds us of the brevity of time, how time is just getting away from us day by day, and how important it is for us to redeem our time, to take care of our time. So as we think about this particular devotional, or these series of devotionals, we want to deal with this idea of anxiety. And Blake, last week we talked about depression, and we talked about how depression can be either actual serious clinical depression that requires professional help and medication, or other things, other therapies, or it can be just something that maybe causes us to be discouraged, to maybe have the blues, be a little bit down or whatever, but it's nothing to be taken lightly. And anxiety is certainly one of the leading causes of depression, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we know there's a lot of people who are struggling with anxiety. And when we talk about it here in the way it's used in the Bible, could be used in a slightly different way than we think of anxiety today. Again, we want to kind of repeat the message from last week. If you are dealing with a lot of anxiety, we definitely don't want to minimize that or treat it like it's not a serious issue. And we know it's definitely something that can plague a lot of people, for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that cause anxiety. Not the least of which for the last couple of years is all this stuff, right? Having to deal with masks and social distancing and vaccinations or no vaccinations and hospitalizations, and then just all the kind of the fallout from the worldwide pandemic that we've been enduring for now over a year and a half. But that's just one of the factors that leads to anxiety. The first lesson on Monday used as its jumping off point 1 Peter 5, verse 7, where Peter says, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you, of course, in reference to God. And the author makes the point, and I think it's a very good one, that you've just sort of made here. And that is, it's not just as easy as saying, well, I'll just give God all my anxiety and then I don't have anything to worry about anymore. It's not always just a matter of have greater faith, put your trust in him, and all your anxieties will melt away. He points out that the word that the Bible uses for anxiety in both the Old and the New Testament has to do with a divided mind, or we might even say a confused mind. When we have so many things going on in our heads, that can lead to, and actually is the biblical definition of anxiety. There's just so much going on there, and we don't know where to put our priorities. We don't know what things to focus on, and sometimes we don't even know what to do. And that's how anxiety can be debilitating to us. It can cause us to just sort of be paralyzed. However, when we think about that, this is God's antidote or vaccination, if you will, against anxiety, and that is the knowledge that God can help us to be singular minded and can take our minds, our hearts off of all these things that often confuse us and cause us to get uptight and to have anxiety, and to focus on him. And when we simplify our lives and keep our priorities straight, that certainly is one way we can deal with anxiety. And I believe that's what Peter is talking about here.
Yeah, for sure. And you can, definitely see this in probably your world and the world we live today. Just so much competing for our attention, and we're just pulled so many different directions. And we feel like if we're over here doing something, then we're neglecting stuff over here, and it just can create a lot of worry and stress. And I think kind of like what you touched on, Peter here is just kind of saying, if we have that mindset of knowing what's most important, then that can kind of help align those other things. It's not that we cast all those off and neglect the way we live in the world, but the way we live in the world is different. How we manage what we do, and it's just different focus.
Sure. And I love the action step for Monday that he asked us to take, and that is to make a list of anxieties, things that really trouble me, that cause my mind to be divided, and be honest with myself about these things that I have allowed to divide my mind, to shape my priorities, and then trust that God can help me with those things, and that I can put those things in proper order. Then Tuesday, the title is The Purpose. And he cites a passage from Psalm 139. Actually, there's a typographical error in the book. It should be verses 23 and 24, as I've noted here, instead of verses 24 and 25. Psalms 139, at least in my Bible, didn't have a verse 25. So if you've been looking at verse 25, then realize that that's probably just a typographical error. But the psalmist says here, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous," one translation here says, "anxious way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." The idea here is that if I ask God to help me sort out these things and find the real purpose that I have in life, then that will help me to deal with anxieties in a more appropriate way.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of a little bit of what we hit on just a second ago, but yeah, just kind of sitting back and realizing what kind of priorities do I have.
Yeah, he points out that anxiety as a human function really serves a good purpose in some ways. It serves to warn us and alert us to potential threats and danger. So if we are feeling anxious, we do need to evaluate that feel. And I think that's part of what he's saying here. Search us. Help me to search. Help me to identify, why is it that I'm feeling anxious about this? And if there is a very real and present danger, then I certainly may need to do some things that can be done to avoid that danger. So in that sense, anxiety is a good thing, because it does tend to protect us from potential danger, potential harm. But sometimes, and this is very often the case, we get to where we imagine things. We think that there are threats that are out there, as it were, dangers that are out there that really are non-existent, or that will never, in all likelihood, affect us and impact us. So that's kind of the idea here of sort of sorting out what some of these anxieties are and why it is that we're having them. And it may be that we can just discard some of those things, because we realize that, this is not a real danger. This is something that's never going to happen to me, or this is not something that I can do nothing about whatsoever. And so I can sort of cast that aside.
Yeah. And he has some good questions there at the end too, of like, okay, and if those are kind of just imagined or in our head, what is this trying to tell me? Like, what is the real root of all this fear and worry? Sometimes it takes some time to get to that answer, but he has some good questions there at the end.
Yes, indeed. And maybe you have someone in your home or a friend that you can actually discuss some of these things with, and maybe it is hard sometimes to examine ourselves and to figure some of these things out. But you could ask a friend, okay, what is this anxiety telling me? What am I missing here? Why is it that I feel this way? Can you help me think through this? And how can I overcome that? And so certainly here the psalmist is asking God to do that, and we should do that as well. But we can also ask a friend, an accountability partner, a loved one, a family member, a husband or wife, and that can help us to deal with our anxiety as well. Then today's devotional, He cites Psalm 12, verse 25, anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. He points out that the King James notes the word heaviness here instead of anxiety. And that's interesting, isn't it? That anxiety can be can physically affect us as well as obviously emotionally or mentally affect us, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a saying I've heard. It's been going around more recently, I think, of but hurt people hurt people. Like when people have been hurt, whether emotionally or physically, that weight and the burden that they carry around can sometimes come out in the way we interact with others, and just kind of create that negative spiral down to just spreading that burden and heaviness to the people around us.
Yeah, he points out the alarming rise in the suicide rates in the United States over the last 15 years. And that is not something at all that we want to make light of or to just push aside. That's a very real thing, and especially among younger people. And I wish I knew all the reasons for that. I wish I could unravel all that. Certainly, some of the reason that we get to that state that we don't think life is worth living has to do with this whole idea that we don't fill our lives with this good word. We focus on the anxieties, the heaviness that we have, and everybody has it, to the point that it just becomes so debilitating that we don't think life's worth living. And again, I don't want to simplify or oversimplify anything about this whole process. It's very serious. And let me just say here, if you are having suicidal thoughts, please, please, please talk to someone. Do not just brush this aside. Talk to someone who can help you. Share this with someone. Let someone know, because you are worth being here and you have something to offer. There are those who do love you and who do care about you. So I want to appeal to you, if this is something that you have contemplated or you are contemplating, don't brush it aside. And furthermore, if you have a friend who has communicated this to you, then don't just scoff at that either. Help that friend get help. In the same way that hurt people, helping people can help others as well. So let's be those helpers rather than those who hurt. But he points out that our words do matter. So we need to share those good words with people, and make the heart glad as opposed to weighing the heart down with heaviness. And again, in the action steps, he cites a passage from Philippians 4:8-9, where he talks about whatsoever things are pure and whatsoever things are lovely and of good report, if there's any virtue, if there's any praise, think on these things. Focus on the positive. That's not being Pollyanna. That's not being, ignoring the things that we need to deal with. But that's a way of life that will improve our mental outlook on life when we focus on the good things, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think it just kind of changes that perspective, and that he gives two kind of sides to this, Devo. Are you helping or are you hurting people, with the way you carry yourself too? So.
Absolutely. Well, Thursday's devotional has to do with individual, and he cites a whole series of Jesus' teachings here from Luke 12. Luke's record of what we call in Matthew the Sermon on the Mount. Some have said this is a sermon that Jesus might have preached frequently, the Sermon on the Plain here. But among other things, he sort of introduces this idea of anxiety and the things we worry about. He says, I tell you, don't be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. For life is more than food and the body more than clothing. And he just introduces the idea that Jesus does, that there are so many things that sort of weigh us down, that we get bogged down with, that really aren't that important in the grand scheme of things. And he goes on in that sermon to remind us that he provides the things that we need. And this is really an issue of trust. It's trusting that God will provide for us the things that we need. It's it's hard to put some of those things out of our minds, especially in a world where people have a tendency to compare what they have to what somebody else has, compare abilities to somebody else, and even have compare an overall life to other people's lives. And we see, on social media so often people sort of put their best foot forward. You have these pictures of the perfect family, and we all know that families have difficulties, even the ones that seem to be so perfect. So there's so many things that we can worry about and wonder about and be anxious about. And Jesus just reminds us here to keep our priorities in line and seek the right things. He talks about a proactive response to the reality of worry and anxiety by guarding the heart against the exaggerated needs that we sometimes feel.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of mentions how that can kind of weigh down on the person too, and what it can do to our bodies. I like the psalm that sometimes we kind of, I don't know, look at our modern day as being so much worse and so much more filled with pain and anxiety than in the past. And while it's true, we have a lot of different forms of anxiety, and worry and stress. Those things were still around, as you can see reading the Bible, but he talks a little bit about sitting back and kind of remembering the ways that we've been delivered, or that God's people in general have been delivered from the stress and burdens of this world, and kind of keep the mindset in the place of we serve a God who protects his people and helps his people. We may not always see that exactly the way we want it, but we can definitely look back, I think, and see ways that's come true in the past for us and for other people.
And I think we talked about it, at least in passing, or mentioned it in passing last week, the idea of counting your blessings. Like that song says, count your blessings, name them one by one. And when we do that, it's almost like with every blessing that we recall, a burden is lifted, and that anxiety subsides somewhat. So again, we don't want to push aside the things that we need to be concerned about, but by the same token, we don't want to focus on those things that cause anxiety so much so that we lose sight of our blessings. And I think that's one of the great messages of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and of this passage that is here in Luke 12. Then the last day's devotionals for this week has to do with a plan for action in going forward. It's not enough to just say, don't worry. We need to understand exactly what that means. He points out that when Jesus said, don't worry about anxiety, or don't be anxious, what his audience heard was don't have this divided mind. Don't be overburdened with troubles and cares while focusing on those to the neglect of the good things, the positive things. He mentions that the word here can mean to choke out or to strangle. And in the parable of the sower, Jesus says that that's kind of what happens sometimes when good seed falls among the thorns. Those thorns can rise up and just choke it out. And maybe that's the way we feel sometimes when we're having such anxiety. 2 Corinthians 10:5, Paul says, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. And again, it's taking it a little bit out of the context here, but just this idea of having our thoughts captive to Christ, keeping our thoughts focused and centered, captured, if you will, by Christ. That's so very important as we deal with anxiety, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of repeats what I said a little bit at the beginning. I may be about to repeat a little bit of that, but yeah, making sure that we know what's most important in our lives and where we're headed. It's not always going to cast away those anxieties and those burdens, but it will help at least put them in their proper context and their proper place. And then just always reminds us of what we're truly here for. Some of the anxieties that we have, worries that we have are caused because we can expend ourselves a little, maybe too much than we need to at times. I know for me, I like right at the beginning of COVID, I had said yes to a bunch of things that I probably should have said no to a couple of things. And I had a bunch of stuff on my plate, and I was actually getting pretty anxious and worried trying to get all those things done. And COVID hit and kind of wiped those things out. And I think one lesson we learned from COVID was a lesson on priorities of what's really important. And that's just kind of what comes to mind when I think of all of this. And
sure.
That this text in 2 Corinthians a little taken our context, but the main beef of it is make sure you're focused on where you're putting your thoughts and your priorities and what's most important in your life.
Yeah, and he cites one of my favorite passages in the Bible, 1 John 4:4, just a reminder that greater is he that is in you than he that's in the world. And I need to be reminded of that, not only just intellectually, but emotionally as well. I need to remember that the Lord is with me. And I don't always feel like it. It doesn't always feel like he's there, but I know that he is there. And when I understand that, then it becomes a more of a reality to me. And it is comforting and it's helpful in these times of stress and trouble and turmoil and anxiety. So again, we don't want to minimize the anxiety you may be feeling. If you are feeling such, we do want to help you with that as much as we can. It may be that you need help from someone even more qualified than we are to help you. And we encourage you to seek that help, or if we can help you find that help, let us know. But of course, as we've pointed out, one way we can deal with anxiety is to pray. And we love to pray with you and for you. And we love to pray ourselves to relieve our anxiety. And you can let us know about your prayer requests either by calling us here at the church office, or to send us an email, or via our website, www.redbankchurchofchrist.com. There is a way that you can actually offer or request prayers even anonymously if you so desire. So let us know how we can help you. We want to help you deal with the things that you're dealing with in your life, and maybe answer any questions that you might have if we possibly can. So I've asked Blake, if you will, to lead us in a prayer as we kind of wrap this thing up, and then we'll move on for today.
Let's pray. Dear God, we come bowed before you, just asking that you be with just me and Steve and whoever happens to listen to this recording. We just ask that we know that we live in a world that's filled with a bunch of anxiety and worry, and we just ask that through all that we'd be able to cast all those burdens, all those cares on you, God, and to turn to you in those times of loneliness and heartache and worry, and to remember what's most important, and to fix our attention and our thoughts on you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Blake. And thank you for joining us today. We do hope you have a good rest of the day and a good rest of the week. And again, if we can help you in any way, please let us know. God bless.